by asking Mr. Robert Parker, would you lead us in the salute, please?
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, Madam Clerk, you want to call roll?
Certainly. Marcia Burke-Bigler, Chair.
Here.
Kitty Jung, Vice Chair, is absent. Von Hartung.
Here.
Jeannie Herman.
Here.
Commissioner Bob Lucy is absent. Fire Chief Charles Moore.
Here.
Deputy District Attorney David Watts-Vial.
Here.
I'm Nancy Parent, County Clerk. You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Chief.
Madam Chair, item number 3 is public comment. Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Board of Fire Commissioners' agenda. The district will also hear public comment during individual action items, with comment limited to 3 minutes per person. Comments are to be made to the Board of Fire Commissioners as a whole. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment?
I have one person signed in.
Okay.
Bob Parker.
Good morning, I'm Bob Parker. We've lately seen some really poor emergency responses in this county. I'd like to talk about automatic aid for critical medical emergencies. After midnight on February 2nd, a car went out of control. Instead, it rolled and ejected 2 people who were both critically injured. It was right in front of TM Station 13 on Silver Lake Boulevard, but that area belongs to the city of Reno. So TM13 was not allowed to respond. After the first 911 call, Reno sent the only engine company they have in the North Valley that have a paramedic. And subsequent callers reported bodies in the street, one person screaming, the car was upside down, leaking gasoline. So Reno then sent a battalion chief and a crew from downtown. The battalion chief on the radio asked Reno Dispatch if there were any TM stations available. So Reno Dispatch had to call TM Dispatch, who told them, yes, Station 13 is in quarters. So they then called the battalion chief on the radio and told him that. He then told them to ask for Station 13. So then they had to call TM Dispatch and get Station 13 to dispatch. This process took 3 minutes. It's one of the things that the consultants all complain about. Actually, it turns out that engine 13 was on scene before the Reno engine, which is only 2 miles away. It took 9 minutes from the first 911 call to get these people a paramedic. 2 people were critically injured, and had we had automatic aid, the first paramedic would have been there in 1 minute. I think we all think this is a lousy idea. The fire union, I watched the meeting on the 14th. The fire union doesn't like automatic aid. And on the 14th, the Reno's fire chief says, my goal is reconsolidation. It's important to realize that the proposal for reconsolidation that was presented 3 or 4 years ago involved taking all the TM money and their equipment and closing TM fire stations. One of the fire stations that they were going to close was Station 13, which is going to turn into Burger King. I think you realize that you get a better emergency response from TM 13 than you do from Burger King. Thank you very much.
Chief.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 4 is Commissioners' Fire Chief's announcements, requests for information, topics for future agendas, and statements relating to items not on the agenda. I have no announcements.
You have nothing? Commissioner Herman, Commissioner Lucy? Commissioner Hartung? Sorry, Lucy's on this side.
I wish I was as young as Commissioner Lucy, but thank you. That's a lovely sentiment. Chief, where are we with our fuels reduction program?
Are you speaking to the green waste program or just fuels reduction throughout the area?
Both. So the reason I'm asking for this is I'd like to, again, come back and talk about things we've talked about in the past with respect to some fuels reduction, especially in the outlying areas. There are some places that really need to be attended to. And then also, I would like to talk about how TM can help just private residents get a buffer, that cleared space, that defensible space. Because I know for me, I'm happy to pay TM. I have no issue with that, but I'd really like to just have this conversation about what's allowed, what's not allowed. Can TM come out and actually use that masticator?
I believe that the policy in the past has been that we don't want to compete with the private sector. However, we have provided our services under certain grants.
Well, you know how hard it is to get the private sector to come out. So again, I'd like to, right now, it's impossible to find somebody with a masticator. So I'd like to have that conversation.
Okay? I'll cue
thank you.
that up for an agenda item.
Anything else, Commissioner Hartung?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing, Chief, so we will close 4 and move on to number 5, the consent agenda. We have a motion to approve and a second. Do we have any public comment on the consent agenda?
No, ma'am.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We will move on to number 6, Chief.
Item 6 is the IAFF Local 3895 report for discussion only, and Mr. Satterfield is here.
Good morning.
Good morning. Ian Satterfield, Local 3895 President for the record. I hope everyone's doing well this morning. It seems like winter has finally arrived, maybe.
Whether we like it or not.
First, I wanted to have a little discussion with you in regards to one of my favorite subjects, and that being dispatch. So just to to set the stage here, and again, this is just my story from 17, but we had a call that came in, after doing some research in it, the call came into Sparks. And typically that call should be transferred to TM, and then Station 17 would respond. At this time, Sparks only transferred it to REMSA, so there was a delay in it actually getting to Truckee Meadows, a delay of actually 3 minutes in time. The concern there is the time piece, right? I mean, that's us as firemen, that's what we live for, is that time piece, getting there quickly. And the reason why, and I think you guys all know, is every breath, every heartbeat has a limited amount of time. So it's incredibly important for us to get there. And I think it's important for us to remember the models that we have set up within our county, i.e. with REMSA being a system that is a system status management, which the ambulance floats around, whereas the fire station is a set engine. So typically out of that Station 17 for a call of this nature, typically that engine's available and it responds. But there's no guarantee that REMSA has a unit in that area based on how their system is set up. So with that being said, to me it makes more sense that our dispatch is the one that takes the call, EMD's the call, and gets us going there quicker, because we know that we have an engine there, and that code that gets printed or pushed out on the EMD could be sent to REMSA, and they could still have their own dispatch and send their own people and run their system that they need to send. But the importance on that timepiece is that we're the ones getting sent first, and we're taking out a lot of those communication challenges between the several different dispatches that we have. The second thing I wanted to bring up this morning, and I think it was brought up a couple meetings ago, is the health insurance challenge that we have. I want to say I'm incredibly excited because Local 3895 and Chief Moore and his staff are collaborating together. We see this as a major challenge, one that if we all come together, we can solve this problem and bring something back, hopefully at the end of the year, that has something and our goal right now in that group is sustainability. I mean, we, on the local side, realize it, and I know Chief Moore does too, but having a health insurance program and plan that benefits the employees as well as maintains sustainability is incredibly important. So with that, I know there will be more to come with that, but I'm just super excited that, you know, we're coming together to solve the problem, because we can solve problems a lot better as we come together. Lastly, and this is one of my favorite things to announce, we're heading down that path for the Guns and Hoses event. And it's going to be on April 30th this year. It's the 6th annual. And this is an amazing event. I mean, this is an event that Local 3895 partnerships with the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. And you know, as you guys know, I mean, we work with them hand in hand, day in and day out on the street. And for them to come together with us and us to come together with them, it's made this event amazing. Amazing enough that over the last 5 years, we've raised over $100,000 for the Northern Nevada Children's Cancer Foundation. So hopefully, if you guys are golfers, I'm not a golfer, I still go out and do it. It's actually pretty silly and funny to watch me golf. But we do have a few that are pretty serious about it. But hopefully you can mark your calendar, at least come down and visit and see everybody. It is a fun day. And again, I just want to thank the assistance that we get from the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. Without them, I don't think this event would be as grand as it has become. So with that, I'm all finished, unless you guys have any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Without much discussion, Mr. Satterfield, you mentioned a call that came into 17. Was that in the unincorporated area of the county where the resident was, or was it inside the city of Sparks?
It was in the unincorporated area.
It was unincorporated.
Correct.
Okay. And it was routed to Sparks Dispatch.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chief?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item number 7 is new hire announcements and badge pinning. I want to introduce to you Todd Meckler, who is now the 3rd mechanic to join us. And Todd comes to us with lots of experience, 15 years of experience as a mechanic, and comes to us from the airport, correct? So I wanted to introduce Todd, and his wife, Melissa, will pin his badge. And I want to give Todd a very hearty welcome to TMFPD.
Terrific.
Push it straight in, Melissa. Yeah. There's a couple of paramedics, don't worry. That way it stays.
Very nice. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much.
So I'll conclude with, it's kind of a shock to me that we have almost 120 pieces of rolling stock with vehicles with tires on them. So having 3 mechanics is really going to help us keep our fleet in our ready status.
It's a lot. Okay, Chief, it's time for your report, number 8.
Madam Chair, I wanted to introduce, if I turn this on, I wanted to introduce Captain Derek Reed, who will give us a short presentation on our water rescue efforts. We've had a failure of our old Zodiac boat, which just due to age, it's just not serviceable anymore. So we made a new purchase, and I've asked Captain Reed to update us on what we're doing with respect to water rescue.
Good. Welcome.
Good morning. For the record, Derek Reed, Captain and Water Entry Team Coordinator for Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. I am pleased to present to you today a new piece of equipment that we recently purchased. This piece of equipment is replacing Boat 16, which services Washoe Lake and Little Washoe. This particular boat was purchased in 1985 by the previous Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District pre-consolidation. We started having some mechanical issues that we weren't able to resolve without spending a lot of money in it, so that's what brought us to the table. And we explored 6 different options with general purpose, criteria, functionality, and service longevity. Some of those things were we tried to match the boat to, the Truckee Meadows area, including Washoe Lake. It is a shallow water lake. Sometimes it's full of water like it is right now. And sometimes it's a near mud puddle. A lot of the marine style motors that, that are out there, they rely on cooling the motor by pulling water up from the bottom of the shaft where the prop is, and that's how that works. Well, in an environment with mud and debris, that's not always the best thing, and actually is really hard on that equipment. So what we bought is, to give you the official name, it is a 17-foot Excel shallow water boat with a 40 horsepower Vanguard motor on it. It is a surface drive, which is somewhat unique. Again, it's not a marine style motor. It's a industrial motor, which are almost exactly like the motors that we put on our Type 5s pumps for our pickup trucks, which kind of takes that special marine mechanic special. Can't think of the word, but it's more difficult to take a motor that is a marine type motor to a marine shop. They're pretty expensive and they're pretty foreign to the average mechanic.
Is this jet drive or prop driven?
It is not. It's a prop driven. We did investigate some of the jet drives, but the problem with the jet drives is they need at least 18 inches of water. And again, it's pulling up sediment from the bottom into the pump. And over a short period of time, that causes mechanical damage within the motor itself. The prop drive that we have, it's a patented design. It's sealed, and anything from the water level down, there's no water coming up into the motor at all. Some of the videos that you would see, when we don't have one for you, but you could take this motor and boat into the mud, and it only needs a thin layer of water to continue going through the mud.
So it has a very shallow draft.
Very. And actually, there's not much of a draft at all. It's based on your trim. So your prop is level with the water until you trim it down into the water. And once you plane out, you bring that up. By the best performance of this motor, once you plane it out, that prop is halfway above the water, which is kind of strange to think about it. But when you watch this video, you'll see there's what we call rooster tail, and that's normal. And that's because that prop is right at the surface. So it only needs a few inches of water to operate. And what this has done for Washoe Lake is the acreage that we're able to cover now that we weren't able to cover before. So we can get into the wetlands, we can get into many different areas. The other unique feature of this boat is because it's an aluminum hull, it's a flat bottom boat. It has a reinforced bow, a V-hull, to where it can break up to 2 inches of ice. So going out in the winter is not a problem for that boat at all. That's what it was designed to do. Like I said, mud doesn't damage it at all. It's a sealed unit. And let me see what else I can give you on that. And feel free to ask any questions. So the functionality of it, like I said, shallow water capable, can break up to 2 inches of ice. And this can go where no prop motor, marine motor, can go. The expansion to the wetlands, and it's also suitable for rivers. In Idaho, they use these in the rivers all the time. So we could use it in the river. Wouldn't necessarily want to, but it is possible, and I know that they've had some motor-driven boats in the Truckee. The service longevity, it's an aluminum alloy material. It's going to last a long time, probably longer than the 1985 boat that we were retiring. And that's pretty much it on the boat's got a twin LED head searchlight. It's got an open hull for lots of room. And it's got a, off the transom, off the stern, there's a step deck. And that's built in for the shallow water purpose and design to plane it out quicker, so it's not dragging the tail end. But what it does provide is a rescue deck, in a sense, so.
That's good. Where's it based? What station?
It's 16, that's in Washoe Valley. But it can be dispatched anywhere.
Thank you very much. That's good information. We're certainly, Chief, glad that we've added this boat. We know it's important, especially if the weather warms back up again.
Yeah,
That lake
absolutely.
has a lot of water in it, and there'll be people out there.
Yes,
So-
and if it pleases you, I can give you an update of 2017 and current and expected river forecast for this year.
Okay?
Last year, we had an exceptional snowpack and obviously an exceptional runoff. We hit some records as far as the discharge from Tahoe and between Tahoe and there. The forecast we're looking at right now, the river levels are at about 300, between 300 and 400 cubic feet per second, which is actually below what our average is at this point, this time of year, on a 23-year average. In 2017, we had 21 calls for rescue, and that includes static water, swift water, and also ice rescue. There was 2 fatalities, possibly 3. Still getting data on that. So our water entry team currently right now has 25 members. They're all swift water technicians. 20 of them are paramedics. And in 2017, we had a combined training hours of 215. We had several joint trainings with the City of Marino's water entry team, and we have been doing training with them for the last 3 years, especially around the springtime before the runoff. We participated in a Rivers for Change. It was a Source to Sea. It's an organization, not-for-profit, that signs up middle school children in this area, and they do a float from Source to Sea, which is Tahoe to Pyramid. They gather information, 6 different areas within the watershed of the Truckee River, and then they present a report that next year to their schools. We also did that with Reno as well. And one last item, we did send 10 of our personnel to boat training. It was a Coast Guard approved course up in Tahoe. It was a joint training with Tahoe, Douglas, and Incline. And so they are now certified as boat operators. And if you have any questions, that's all I have for you.
Commissioner Hartung?
Thank you. You know, I noticed it doesn't have a helm, so you have to operate it from the rear, which is,
Yes, it's tillered. And the most feasible way to tiller that boat is in a standing position. There's
Right.
actually a handle that you hold on to, and you have a good visual of
so
where
you
you're-
said it was flat bottom, which is not a terribly great design if that lake gets rough, or actually I should say when it gets rough, and that boat can take on water pretty easily. So you guys,
Well, it does have a, that boat is specifically designed for rivers and shallow water. So it has a tapered chine in
Yes.
the back, so the maneuverability is much better. And it also has a bilge pump built into the boat.
yes.
The Coast Guard approved test that this one did pass is if it's full of water and to weight capacity, it'll still float.
I'd rather not be in it.
This is a perfect addition for the Washoe Lake area, even with the
Understood.
waves.
You know, I would take all the opportunities. I've had a lot of experience in boats. I'd take every opportunity you can when it's rough to go out there and just practice. And make sure that you guys understand how to keep that thing facing.
Yes, sir.
Because it'll take on water pretty quick. I mean, it's styled like a bass boat without the chairs.
Right.
But I can tell you, that lake gets rough. I've had a little bit of experience out there many years ago. It hasn't been full enough in recent years. Some say blessedly, others say not so blessedly, but Washoe Lake can be a little more treacherous than you think, especially when the winds start blowing 75 miles an hour through there.
Absolutely.
So, well done. Good luck.
Thank you, sir.
I know one of the things I see along the river, since I live right off the river and walk my dogs through there, the state, I think it's from the Department of Wildlife. I don't know. I don't remember now which state department it is, but they have put up in the summertime life preservers for people to borrow if they're going to get in the river. Is there anything like that being done out in these lakes with all the water that's out there?
I can't speak to the lakes. We don't do anything like that, but last year we did have a program where we stationed PFDs along the river in certain areas, especially the parks. And that was due to the high water level.
Right.
We're examining that program. We want to make sure, we put signs up. We're not able to measure whether that was a successful program or not, because we didn't have any recorded rescues with those particular safety items. I think the concern is, they're there, and as you said, for use, where our purpose was therefore tossing into the river.
Right.
If somebody's floating down. There might be some issues with people thinking that they're there so they can enter the river. And we
what
don't
they
want that
think.
misconception out there.
Trust me, they did that.
Yeah, so we did have a few that were missing, and we don't know what capacity that those were used in. I think a successful program that has already been in place is the mile markers that are embedded in the walking paths.
Yeah.
Quick notification is probably the best thing that we can preach to the public, because once that call is made, we start coming. And with the river levels the way they were last year, when the current's traveling at 10 miles an hour, that's faster than you see people running on the treadmill at the gym. You can't keep up with those people. So quick notification, last point seen, and then that way it can set us up. But if they're trying to attempt a rescue rather than call 911, it puts them at danger and it delays our response, and now our search area is wider. And that's what we want to discourage.
Well, these are racks, and they actually have life jackets connected to them, and it is the Department of Wildlife. I just realized I can see the sign in my eye, but it's the Department of Wildlife that put them out there, and the State Department of Wildlife that put them out there. And they actually have a sign that said, if you want to go in the river, please use one of these and just put it back wherever all along the river. This particular park is actually Chrissy Collin, so it's because that's where I walk my dogs. But I think it's a good idea from the perspective of there are people who will go get in that lake and try to swim a distance and maybe not be able to get that far, and at least if they have life jackets, they'd be safer.
Yes, and the cold water is probably the biggest factor. It's not
Yeah.
whether you're a good swimmer or not. That cold water shock response in this time of year, most drownings happen within the first couple minutes, and the reason is
Yeah.
because of the reflex of the hyperventilation and gasping. And if their head goes underwater during any of that time, they're sucking in water, and that's when the drowning occurs. With the life jacket, they're able to sustain warmth a little bit through the life jacket, but also floatability, because after somewhere around the 10-minute mark, with water temperatures in the 40s, they lose purposeful movement to where they can self-rescue. They don't have that ability, and that's why they drown secondary.
Right.
So hypothermia doesn't really set in until beyond 30 minutes to an hour. So.
Commissioners, any other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation, and good luck with that boat. It sounds great fun.
Thank you, ma'am.
Chief?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I neglected to mention that Derek Reed's presentation was part of the fire chief's report on 8A, Section 1, for the record. Item number 2, AVL and auto aid update. I wanted to mention that I took a trip along with Chief Cochran and Adam Hines from REMSA and J.W. Hodge from REMSA to look at how Clark County does their dispatching. And nothing's simple when you get into the weeds, but from what I could tell, that this really didn't seem too complicated. So fire and EMS in Clark County and City of Las Vegas and City of North Las Vegas is dispatched out of the headquarters station of Las Vegas. And in a room, they have one dispatcher dedicated to Clark County's geographical jurisdiction, one for the City of Las Vegas and one for North Las Vegas. And there's a whole lot of other consoles that are available if they get really, really busy. But nevertheless, the system is set up to where the software allows any dispatcher to pick a resource from any other agency, particularly when it's along the border. So the way that they're using AVL appears to me to be quite efficient, without a lot of hiccups, and seems to be a very, very good system that we can use as a model to pattern here. I've talked to Dean Dow at REMSA, and I believe he recognizes the inefficiencies of the way that we're dispatching. I believe he's on board. The chief of Sparks has mentioned that he is willing to study. He's been given direction from his city manager to study consolidated dispatch for fire. And certainly Chief Cochran was there to look at the situation. So I was very, very encouraged by that field trip, and I don't think that this is going to be a solution that would be hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think it would be somewhat less than that. So very, very encouraged by that.
Chief, are they all in the same room? Or are they, you know, in this day and age, you don't have to be in the same room to have a meeting or to have the ability to communicate immediately?
They were all in the same room. From what I understood, that the call is actually taken at a different location. So the call taker asks the 911 caller, do you have a law enforcement emergency, do you have a fire emergency, or do you have a medical emergency? And then it gets routed to the Las Vegas station, those dispatchers there who then EMD the call and then send the appropriate resource out.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Hartung?
Chief, one of the primary differences, though, as I recall, in southern Nevada is that their fire service is doing transport as well. Is that everywhere, or do they also have private transport?
They also have private
Integrated. Okay.
transport, and from my understanding is that they dispatch the privates from that location as well.
I see.
So I believe, I heard Dean Dow say that he would like to have a presence in that consolidated dispatch, which REMSA has a lot of expertise with respect to EMD processes. So my vision of this would be to have all four agencies co-located in one location.
Well, the benefit that I see ultimately is dispatching the proper level of service to a call.
Without a
Where-
lot of change in time and
Well,
calling
and
each other and,
I happened to witness a minor fender bender on the freeway the other day. I was actually traveling in the opposite direction, but it was traveling relatively slow, and there was an engine there already. REMSA was there, and another engine drove by. And it just seemed to be a little bit of an overkill because nobody was injured. So it just, and it wasn't our agency. So it was just rather interesting to see how much response was rendered.
The goal would be not to over-respond or
Exactly.
under-respond, but respond the appropriate number of
Exactly, exactly. If someone needs to be extricated, I want the proper level of response. I don't care how many companies we have to, whether they're Sparks, TM, or Reno, it doesn't matter. But When it's just a minor fender bender, there's just no reason to respond 2 engines, not only, taking them out of the house, but just the cost of response. After a
Yes.
while, that gets to be overbearing.
And probably not sustainable over the long term.
Agreed.
So,
Thank you, Chief.
Chief, what are the next steps? Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. What are the next steps?
I am scheduled to meet with Chief Cochran, Chief Maples, Dean Dower, his staff, and perhaps some supervisors at dispatch. I believe it's the 27th of February to sit down and begin discussions about how we can move this forward.
Okay.
I don't see a lot of physical plant investments per se, but it's interesting for the population of in excess of 1 million in southern Nevada. They were dispatching out of a room no larger than what we have at Parr Boulevard. So the discussions will begin later this month.
Okay, good. Thank you, Chief.
Item A3 is a commissioner dashboard. The chair had asked me, Madam Chair, you had asked me to put together this dashboard, so we don't take a lot of time discussing this. I just wanted to put this before you. I would plan to meet with each of you individually in the next month to either add, subtract, or cross out things on your dashboard, but this is at least a point of beginning.
Okay. Good.
Items B and C are the career and volunteer statistics. Unless there's any specific questions from the board, I'll let those reports stand.
Any questions, guys? Okay, Chief.
Item number 9 is discussion and possible approval to create 5 additional full-time paramedic positions. This item is, we're anticipating staffing the rescue full-time in the next budget cycle. We believe we need to get a head start on recruiting and possibly even hiring. If we wait until the budget's approved in the next fiscal year in July 1, we're already months behind the curve. So it can take us as much as 6 months to recruit and train and put people through an academy. So the purpose of this is anticipating we'll need those employees for the rescue, and we'd like to get started now. They probably wouldn't be hired, best case, until June or July, possibly even a little bit later. But nevertheless, this is a jump start for us.
Commissioner Hartung?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, is this for 1 rescue, or are we contemplating 2?
This is for 1 rescue. Until we know our revenue picture, we're anticipating only 1 rescue. Nevertheless, when we know our revenue picture, we may be able to expand to 2, but I can't say right now.
Okay.
But this recommendation is only for 1.
It's for 1. And will it be based, or will it be roving?
Well, its base of operation would be at Sun Valley.
Okay.
It's always possible that we can rove it based on where our needs are.
Okay.
I would defer to staff on that, on where and how it responds. But nevertheless, the idea is to try to balance the resources eventually to where we have 6 engine companies in the north and 6 in the south. But this is a good place to start for us with the rescue. And when we have a medical call in Sun Valley or in a jurisdiction that's fairly close to Sun Valley, we can respond to the rescue without tying up the engine.
And I totally agree. I think that this is a wonderful response and a wonderful way to deal with things. We might be able to learn some things and be able to cross-reference the way REMSA does business with the piece of software that they have that has a logarithm. And don't ask me how it works, but it contemplates where calls are going to be, and it's amazingly accurate, as you well know. There may be some opportunities for education there for us as to how we deal with those rescues ultimately, or even the initial rescue. And maybe we can work with REMSA as to where they'll contemplate the needs will be.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. Sorry, I'm having trouble with names for some reason today. Chief, I think putting in Sun Valley is an excellent idea, because that is where we have the highest number of EMS calls, so I think that's a really great place to put it, so. Yeah, 17's close. What's the cost of the vehicle itself? Do we have the vehicle already?
We have a vehicle already to use. I've had some discussions with Chief Corrigan about a different vehicle to where it would be not necessarily fire capable, it would be only EMS capable. I would have to take a guess and say about $100,000 for the vehicle.
Okay, good. All right. Any other comments, anybody? Do we have any public comment on this, Madam Clerk?
No, ma'am.
I need a motion. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Chief.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 10 is presentation discussion on possible direction to staff regarding enhanced automatic aid protocols between Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District and the City of Sparks Fire Department. Chief Kukulis is going to give you a presentation, but let me say that I'm very, very excited to finally get this rolled out. We've been working hard on this for about 2 years, and it has not been easy given the fact that we've had different CAD platforms. Those had to be integrated. We've had lots of things programming-wise that we've had to smooth out. So I think this is really ties into what I mentioned in my chief's report about sending the closest unit. So without further ado, I'll let Chief Kukulis explain.
Good. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Alex Kukulis, Battalion Chief, Truckee Meadows Fire. So we're excited to present this. As the chief mentioned, this has been in the works for a couple of years now. I got to give credit to staff at Dispatch and Sparks Fire Department as well. The reason it's taken so long, there's a lot of parts to that, but effectively we've had some changes with the dispatch system itself. Along the planning process, we've reformed and refined things a few times, found some better ways of approaching this. So here we are finally we've been testing for the last couple months with the intent to go live next Monday, the 26th. So we're real close unless something throws a wrench in things here. But it'll probably be helpful if I give a little bit of background on kind of the different ways we can dispatch, where we're at now, where we're going today, next week, and opportunities for the future. So our current dispatch process, and there's been a lot of conversation about that this morning, but when it comes to automatic aid and the boundaries, and I'll focus mostly on us and Sparks, of course this conversation applies to other jurisdictions as well, but the 911 call will go to the area with jurisdiction, to that dispatch center. That dispatch center will dispatch a unit, and if there's automatic aid, it will then cause a dual response. So as an example with Sparks, if the 911 call is within the city of Sparks, but it's closest to, say, Truckee Meadows Station 17, the 911 call will go to Sparks. They will dispatch a Sparks engine. REMS is also going as part of this equation. The call is then transferred, we call it cloned, over to our dispatch center where it's then processed, and then 17 would be dispatched. And we've seen that process cause a delay in that second engine going out the door of up to 3 to 5 minutes on occasion. Of course, being that they're the closest resource, we don't want to see that delay. They're going to be the ones that gets there first and enacts the care that's needed. So the other downside of that, as was mentioned in earlier discussions, was that we're now sending 2 fire engines and an ambulance to an incident, when we're talking about medical calls anyway, that really only require 1 engine. Same thing with some minor MVAs and those sort of things. I'll talk a little bit separately about structured fire responses and that too. So the overarching premise behind what we're calling enhanced auto aid now is that we're trying to only send the right response, a single engine and an ambulance to a medical call or a minor vehicle accident, which makes that second engine available for another call, reduces wear and tear on the apparatus, all those obvious things that come along with that. So that inefficient response is where we've been operating. We've, for now, just focused on the Pyramid Corridor and out La Posada. We expect there's other areas of opportunity here, and that's going to be coming phases, at least between us and Sparks. And again, we haven't looked at the rest of the county, so this is sort of a test pilot. And we did actually start this last July in a small pocket in the south end of Sun Valley that's actually City of Sparks. It's the Moore Park Apartments. And so we've seen it be successful in us just responding in lieu of Sparks to that area for 8 months now. And now we're going to deploy it to the rest. So that brings me to kind of the next level, which is enhanced auto aid. The map up here. The blue areas are the areas that Truckee Meadows will be responding to, regardless of jurisdiction. The orange areas are the areas that Sparks will be responding to. And it can get, I'm not going to try to stay out of the weeds here if I can, but any of those polygons where you see an E in front of the district, I don't know if you can read it on your map, it's sure it's smaller, but if it has an E in front of it, that's an enhanced .08 area, and that means that it's actually, the dirt, if you will, belongs to the other jurisdiction, but the closest resource is responding in those areas. So as an example, I'll use that ET 1708, which is just south of Station 17 on La Posada. That's City of Sparks jurisdiction. Obviously, being that it's across the street from Station 17, we're much closer. So if there's a medical or vehicle accident, a minor type of incident in that area, that 911 call, as soon as it's processed, is going to go directly to Truckee Meadows Dispatch instead of Sparks Fire Department. Truckee Meadows will send an engine immediately. We're going to handle that incident, and for all intents and purposes, we're going to handle it, and Sparks won't even really be aware of the call unless there's additional need. And it works in the inverse with areas that they're closest to, such as like ES 25, which is down south end of Pyramid Highway in Whittakin area. So it's going to just reduce the number of responses for both agencies, keep the rolling stock available as much as possible. When it comes to fires, it's a little bit different. We will still send the closest resource, being that we are closest in this same example. However, Sparks Fire Department will fill out the balance of that alarm. So in that same 1708, we'll send one engine and a battalion chief. Sparks would also send their battalion chief and the 3 additional engines and truck. So that's the process going forward. I'd say that it's a step forward in the right direction from where we've been, but it kind of brings me to just making the point that it's not exactly the gold standard. There's been a lot of conversation about AVL, automatic vehicle location. And just to kind of touch on that real briefly, what that would allow us to do is skip these polygons, and we're making assumptions now that Engine 17's in the station, and we know that that's not always the case. They could be returning from another call, they could be out in district training. So everything we've done here today makes those assumptions, which we know are not always accurate. AVL, on the other hand, is live data. It's constantly tracking the units, and will pull them regardless of where they're at. So if 17 were way up north in its district, it wouldn't recommend them in those areas. It would still go to Sparks, or vice versa. So can I get the other camera up for a second? I just did a little research on the AVL thing. I know that there's a lot of discussion going on that, planning going forward. It's been done down the south for a couple decades. I had to go back and look and see when it first started. And if you can see this document here, I had to pull it out of microfiche. Dated April 1976, dispatching the units of emergency service systems using automatic vehicle location. So we're only 42 years behind on the technology that's been out there for a while. So I will say that we're going to give this a chance. It's going to help, I believe. But again, it's just sort of putting a Band-Aid on an issue that there's probably some better solutions to. And with that, I will answer any questions if you have any.
Sorry, Madam Chair. So is there, and Chief, you may know the answer better than Chief Kukulis. Is there any plans for Sparks to build a station in the north end of Sparks? I mean, there's as you guys know, in 17, there's a ton of growth going on right now as we speak. I mean, they're putting up houses as fast as they possibly can. There's a subdivision going on right at the end of sort of Omni. So do they have any plans that are somewhat on the table to build an additional station?
Chief Maples has advised me that they are looking at another station, a sixth station for the city.
And are we moderating our response? Are we prioritizing so 2s and 3s are somewhat less of a response, or no response at all versus priority 1s?
What we do right now
In
is
terms of auto aid?
And you're talking medicals, I assume?
Yes.
We are sending a resource as soon as we get notification that there's an emergency medical incident. We don't have the priority right away because it's getting, as it was mentioned earlier, it's getting processed through EMD through REMSA.
Okay.
So we will start a response. Oftentimes we'll get on scene before we get that information. Our crews are making contact with REMSA over their radio to get updates on the type of incident and priority, but we've yet to have all that data. There's talk of CAD to CAD links, so we would get that faster and better, but we're somewhat operating in the blind now. But I know there is discussion of those low acuity incidents of us not responding. And I mean, I can give you an example of just, yesterday, not sending an engine out into deep Palomino Valley on a low acuity incident rather than taking it out of the 17 where they can be
Right.
available. So we do that, but more on a case-by-case basis, right?
Well, I know that even REMSA has attenuated its responses for low acuity issues. I've heard a comment was made that someone had, it was an appendicitis. And it took REMSA some time to get there, and we didn't get there either for quite some time. So it's one of those scenarios. I was in Wadsworth, but still, the person was in a lot of pain. It was abdominal pain, but it was a difficult scenario. It was tough for them. The claim was more than 45 minutes. But what can you do on an appendicitis? You got to transport them. They've got to get to a hospital. There's nothing a paramedic can do. And so not that I'm not downplaying the ailment. It's just it's a tough scenario.
I think that's part of the conversation that's ongoing, is trying to identify those calls that we can fairly accurately say we don't need to respond
Yes.
to, and those that we still should, because simply the priority 2s and priority 3s as they're currently delineated maybe aren't where we want to draw the line. So I know Chief Cameron's working on that
Yes.
and continuing
No,
to
I don't know how we balance that, other than with rescues. Rescues are they're the perfect solution, rather than rendering an engine on every single call. That is the perfect solution. It truly is. And then putting out more response as necessary, especially with REMSA. So this is not being critical of REMSA, but that's the responsibility does lie with REMSA to transport. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. Thank you. Commissioner Herman, anything? Okay, we appreciate the presentation. It's very interesting. And do we have
Motion to approve.
I have a motion and a second. Do I have any public comment? No, ma'am. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Chief.
Madam Chair, item number 11 is discussion, presentation, and possible direction to the fire chief regarding the City of Reno's sphere of influence in the Verdi area, as requested by Chair Burke-Bigler. This item, I've asked Bob Webb to give you an overflight of this, and the issue, just to frame it briefly, is if we invest more resources into the Verdi area, the concern would be we don't want to duplicate what the city might be doing.
Right.
And therefore also understand what's currently annexed and what may be left for the county to have to protect. So without further ado, I'll introduce Bob.
For the
Good morning,
record,
Mr.
Bob
Webb.
Webb with Community Services Department. Chief requested that I give you a brief overview. Looking at the time, I'll do that. And the staff report provides a lot of detail that I'm not going to go into, again, in the interest of time, but subject to questions. However, you do have the two maps that you see here in front of you with your staff reports in a lot more detail. The map on your left is the Reno City Master Plan that was recently adopted, specifically the fire capital outlay portion of it. And you'll also notice that the difference between the Reno Master Plan is that there's Truckee Meadows fire stations noted on this. So the City of Reno, as a part of their capital outlay and part of their master planning, are looking at future fire stations for their possible expansion. The concern and the focus here is in the Verdi area, and that's the map on your right. And you'll notice the sphere of influence is in pink, and that's what I'm going to chat about a little bit. But of major concern is the peninsula area of unincorporated land that's left and surrounded by the city. As a planning tool, the sphere of influence is the area in which a city will span in a certain time frame. It's enabled by NRS, and within our current Truckee Meadows Regional Plan, that time frame is laid out as 20 years. Within a sphere of influence, once that the city establishes those in a regional plan, they have the next mechanism that if they adopt a master plan for that area, they can exert certain powers within that sphere of influence. But those certain powers, and you're aware of this, are limited strictly to planning and building, which becomes a confusion point for the citizenry and for staff that when a project goes into, in this case, the City of Reno, the fire responsibility until that property is annexed remains with Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. Oftentimes, there is little or no conversation with the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District for either the master planning in that area as projects move forward until that property is annexed, or in the development of those projects until the property is annexed. State law envisions that properties within the sphere of influence would ultimately get annexed within a 7-year period. That's their annexation process. There's also voluntary annexation that this board is aware of, which does not have to be within the sphere of influence, but can be contiguous. But the concern that we've seen over the years is that if you have already developed lands within the sphere of influence that are currently developed residential, and if you go back to your map with the sphere of influence, I'll show you very quickly. Those areas that are developed currently typically have not been annexed by the city. So even though they're in the sphere of influence, they remain unincorporated property, thus the responsibility of the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District becoming more surrounded by city lands. I noted earlier, very little consultation by the city with Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District for the impacts of fire service provision to those new lands, particularly if the city is unable to initially provide that service. And until they build new fire stations in the Verdi area, that's a concern, is who's going to provide that fire service and where's the planning and coordination that goes between Truckee Meadows Fire and the City of Reno Fire for those newly lands, even if they're annexed, by the way, and the city is unable to provide that service because they don't have the fire station. It's that lack of coordination. And let's suppose that everything happens, the City of Reno annexes all that area that you see in pink, which is down here. The Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District is still responsible to serve those peninsulas. And what you end up with, if you look at this map, you're going to have Truckee Meadows going through city properties to provide service to unincorporated islands. Conversely, you're going to have city fire engines going through unincorporated property to provide service to what amounts to annexed city islands. I know that was a discussion, very brief overview, because I'm recognizing the time that you have. Turning it back over to Chief for comments, discussion, or questions you may have of me.
I know this is a really crazy question and probably rhetorical. I'm not really looking for an answer. But who was the brilliant person who came up with this idea in Verdi of putting the sphere of influence in such a manner that it crawls over the top of each other? I mean, I know it was done at the legislature, but this is stupid. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that, but, you know, it happens to be my opinion. And I am known for giving my opinion, as you know, Mr. Webb. I don't generally keep my thoughts to myself, which is probably not altogether a good idea. But so in light of the fact that we're dealing with what we're dealing with here, is there a possibility of doing a joint fire service in the Verdi area? Assuming that Reno is going to annex everything that they can annex, we're still going to have a problem out here. So is Reno planning to build a fire station out in this area? And is there a way we can do joint fire service somehow in the Verdi area to assure that all the residents, whether they live within the footprint of the city or the footprint of the county, are taken care of?
Well, the answer is yes. In fact, there's a developer here in the audience who wants to engage the city and
Yeah.
TM in
There's
a
a couple of
discussion
those.
about how we would serve Verdi. So we are set for a conference call to discuss that issue. You arguably you could say that response times are adequate from the current Station 35 all the way into Verdi within about 8 minutes. Which is within our our suburban and rural standards. Nevertheless, I think what we want to avoid is duplicating fire stations to the extent that we have more than we need. So we want the exact amount, and you base that on the standards of cover so that the citizens and the boards and the councils know exactly what the response time will be to areas of jurisdictions.
Historically, the City of Reno Fire Department has not used volunteers, and we have a volunteer station in Verdi. So the station probably needs to be relocated somewhere else, or at least needs to be upgraded if all reports are accurate. If Reno does that sit within the footprint of Reno's area that they could annex their sphere of influence?
The volunteer station?
Yes.
It does not, according to the map.
So it would still be in our area, but is this possible discussion of maybe a joint fire service out there. And I know there are several developers who, I've spoken with Ms. Safraza, who represents some interest, and I see her in the audience today, so I know that they have, that they have an interest in working with all of us. Do you think we'll be able to use volunteers in this area that will be able to service within the footprint of the city of Reno? Is that part of the discussion that's going to go on?
Madam Chair, I believe there may be a problem with using volunteers in the city of Reno, perhaps for labor reasons. I can't say definitively, but I've heard that that there may be some sort of side agreement that prohibits that. But nevertheless, one of the issues that the city has said is they're concerned about disparate service levels, that we respond 3, they respond 4. Well, we're getting to one of our priorities in the next fiscal year will be to put that 4th firefighter at Station 35
Right.
in Mogul, therefore negating that argument. So lots to talk about with respect to that. And certainly this issue also kind of mirrors the issue in Cold Springs. But I will say that the city has not approached TM. They certainly have not approached me about how we could be helpful with respect to Verdi or Cold Springs or anywhere else.
I hope that this is an issue that we can, a place for us to start with looking at how we can work together as a team, as a regional team. I don't think it's necessary to reunify or whatever it was called before. I don't think that's necessary from my perspective. Yeah, a contractual arrangement, but I don't think that's necessary. But I do think that we have to work together. We are a region, and I think we have to put our citizens' concerns first. Is there room in our station out there to add another fire truck, for instance, if we did a partnership in a joint partnership for fire out there? Could we possibly put a Reno engine in our fire station if we're going to add a 4th person, then they would bring 4 people in, and could we do that? Would that be a workable solution?
There's room enough for another engine, but there's not room enough for another crew.
A whole nother crew, okay. All right. Any other questions? Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think, Chief, this is another one of those regions that a rescue could work perfectly in, whereby instead of adding a 4th man onto the crew, you have a rescue, and your response for the rescue, your initial response, followed by the engine, which gives you a 5-man crew. And that's an eloquent, in my opinion, a great way to respond to the bulk of what you'll see. We have seen fires, there's no question. We've seen fires in every district. I mean, I'm not going to argue that point. But the bulk of the responses are going to come for medical. And taking the engine out of service to respond to a medical call takes it away from what it was intended and designed to do, which is fight fires.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. I want to include REMSA in the conversation because it's been some months since I talked to Dean Dow about Verdi, but I recall that he desired to have some sort of a presence in Verdi, so I would absolutely want to invite him to the table to talk about that.
And one last thing, Madam Chair, and this is one commissioner only, I would welcome housing them at any of our stations. No problem for them to port there. Rather than somewhere in a neighborhood or in an industrial area where I've seen them in Spanish Springs. I mean, I would welcome them at the station because that's just it's a match made in heaven, in my opinion.
So we do have opportunities with the existing volunteer station, which needs to be rebuilt in a big way because it's nothing short of 4 walls and concrete floor. It has no plumbing for restrooms or kitchen or any creature comforts. And I have talked to Dean Dow about him being a partner in the redevelopment of that particular fire station. So as you mentioned, our EMS calls are anywhere between 75% and 80% of our call volume. Our structure fires are only 1/2% of the total call volume. So nevertheless, there's lots of partners there. REMSA, of course, being a major component of the EMS response.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. Commissioner Herman, this is your district. Do you have anything you want to add to this discussion? I know you have been working for some time on this issue, and I know it's of grave importance to your constituents, so I just want to give you the opportunity to chime in and, maybe there's some additional information you have or some additional ideas you have that could help working with the chief.
I think the chief has got it under control right now. After these meetings that are in the plans, I think we should hear some pretty promising things, so.
Good, thank you. I hope that, Chief, you will keep both Commissioner Herman and myself into the conversation of this. As we move into the summer, who knows what it's going to be like? Maybe we're actually going to get some snow, and that might be good, and it might be bad. But as we move into the summer, I know we're going to have more concerns in this community. And so I hope as you have the conversations with the city of Reno and the developers that you'll keep us in touch and let us help you in any way we can. Thank you.
Madam Chair, would you like public comment?
Okay, we will call public comment. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
I have one person signed in for item number 11, Joel Grace.
Good morning. How are
morning.
you? I think that you took all my talking points so far, but let's see if we can
Sorry.
get through some of them. No, it's perfect. I'm glad that we've brought this issue to the forefront because this is something we've been working on. We've had, I believe, 5 or 6 meetings now with the citizens that are currently reside out there regarding a development. Things they don't want to see, things they do want to see, and fire has obviously become a big one. And we've reached out to Chief Moore. We've been working with Chief Cochran. So the meeting or the conference call that we're putting together is with both the city and county manager and the 2 chiefs to kind of talk through this issue and see how we could do a cooperative agreement of sorts. So our company has donated 3 acres of land right off the interchange right there for a new fire station to be built. One of the things is trying to figure out at which point, right? So one of the things that we have come up with and that we proposed in one of these meetings was a self-imposed fire impact fee that would go towards servicing the Verdi area and the new homes there, and however that would impact the joint agreement, but that would go towards the capital improvements of building a new fire station out there. So it appears that everybody's kind of on board with this in premise, so we just need to kind of get our heads together and kind of finalize something and kind of taking off of from some of the other agreements that have happened in town or in the past to try to glue this together. So we're also working with our neighbors to the south of us that own more land than us out there to try to get them on board for this fire impact fee as well. Obviously, the more houses that are in there, the better is from a standpoint of contributing to this fund. So the way that we've proposed this so far is that per dwelling unit, there would be a fee put into this fund that would go towards those capital improvements. I believe you covered everything else. So outside of the land and the existing fire station that was out there that we own, we've offered up as an interim solution to the city that, there would have to be some upgrades that would be made, but in the interim of the first maps that we're doing, they could utilize that with the county, depending on how they want to handle this agreement. But they could utilize the existing firehouse that's out there and staff that. So I believe that that's all I have. If you have any other questions, comments?
I think so.
Good.
Thank you very
All right.
much.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the board. Anything else, commissioners? Commissioner Hartung?
No, nothing else, Madam Chair. We're styled for possible action. Is there something that you would like to put on the record in terms of action? This is your agenda item.
I actually think that we should just continue moving forward as we've been moving. It looks like Chief and the developers are in fact working on this and working with the city of Reno on it. And I would like to see a report, Chief, sometime soon, if you could give us that. So do we need a motion to approve this report?
No, I don't believe so, Madam
I think
Chair.
we do. I just wanted to make.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Mr.
Go ahead,
Westfield?
If you're just accepting the report, you can either just take the report or make a motion.
Okay.
Either way.
All right, so Chief, if you would continue to work on the project as you guys have been working on it, and please continue to stay in touch with Commissioner Herman and myself on this, so that we can make sure that we get the citizens covered as we move into the summer. I know we're not going to have a joint operating group probably for this summer, but at least we're moving in the right direction, and that's a real positive. So thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, we're ready to move to 12.
Item 12 is discussion and possible approval of an employment agreement for Lisa Beaver to include salary and benefits for the position of Fire Deputy Chief of Fire Prevention for the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District, and authorize the chairman to sign the same, and if approved, introduction of the incoming Fire Deputy Chief. And I want to mention that we hired Ralph Anderson and Associates to do a nationwide search. We used panels of both private sector and public sector evaluators, and the choice was pretty resoundingly for Ms. Beaver. So I wanted to mention that some of her qualifications is that she's a certified building plans examiner, she's a certified building official, she's a certified fire marshal, certified fire inspector, and certified plans examiner. I could go on, but she's very highly qualified, and we were very, very impressed with her enthusiasm and her level of energy, and we're very, very excited to bring her to our team. And if the board approves the contract, I will introduce her quickly.
Okay. Any public comment, Madam Clerk? Okay, Commissioners, I need I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
So it's my pleasure to introduce our new deputy chief, and I can't wait to get her here. Her first day will be April 2nd, and there's a lot of work ahead of her, but nevertheless, she has the drive and the energy and the enthusiasm to really make a contribution for us. So, Lisa.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, commissioners. This morning, I want to say thank you to the board, to Chief Moore, to his staff, and to everyone who played a role in interviewing me, because it was a lot of fun, believe it or not. I'm looking forward to coming here. This is a wonderful area. I'm looking forward to contributing to an already valued department and to a wonderful county. So thank you very much for approving the contract, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you in the future. So
Nice to meet you, and thank you very much for joining our wonderful team.
thank you. All right. Thank you.
Welcome.
My exercise today.
You are. Okay,
Madam Chair,
we're on-
item 13 is discussion and possible did the board act on that? I'm sorry, I may be
Yes, we did.
jumping ahead. Okay. So we're on to item 13.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I wonder if we should bring this back. This was Commissioner Jung's request when she's here for the 360 evaluators.
so you want to pull it for a next agenda? Okay.
Unless there's something different. I mean, I have no issue with it whatsoever,
No, I don't either.
but I know that Commissioner Jung was the driving force behind this particular type of survey. And I'm wondering if she wants to give any input.
Do we have a time frame within which we need to get this done?
Madam Chair, no. I would mention that my contract expires at the end of June.
So we could bring this back in
but We
March?
can bring it back in March.
Let's bring it back in March.
Okay,
Okay.
done. Item 14 is possible closed session for the purpose of discussing labor issues with Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District per NRS 288.220. We do not have a need for a meeting.
Okay.
Item 15 is Commissioners and Fire Chiefs announcements, requests for information, topics for future agendas, and statements relating to items not on the agenda. I will mention that we have, I will be bringing back the Verdi plan, have our consultants here to address those water infrastructure issues that we've been talking about. Dyer Engineer has been looking at a number of issues, all the way from bringing in municipal water from Tumwa to doing localized well-fed cisterns for fire protection. We're going to take a comprehensive look at the fire prevention issues with respect to wildfire, and then some of the operational issues that we'll be looking at in the next fiscal year and years to come.
Okay.
So that will be March 20th.
Commissioners, anything? Okay, we will close that, and we're on to final public comment. Madam Clerk?
I have no one signed in.
Okay, we will close public comment and bring it back to the board, and with that, we are adjourned. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take about 10-minute break, so we'll come back about 10:25 to start our county commission meeting.